So welcome everyone to today's presentation of DBA Fundamentals. Today's presentation is called Become a Contributor to Microsoft Docs from the Microsoft SQL Docs team. And we have here the lovely William Assaf to actually show us the way that will make this all happen. Today is May 11th, 2021. And in the top right-hand corner of your screen, you should be able to see the three co-leaders of the DBA Fundamentals group, Steve Cantrell, Shane O'Neill, and myself, Kevin Wilkie. If you ever have need to, you can reach out to us on Twitter. We have our Twitter handles right next to our names. You can also reach out to us via many social media outlets. First one up is Meetup, where you probably found us to start with. You can also reach out to us on our website, dbafund.org, our wonderful YouTube site, dbafundtube.com, just to make it a little easier for y'all to get to. You can reach out to us on Twitter at dbafun. We have our own Slack channel where we're going through a lot of questions, comments, whatnot. Please reach out to us on Slack if you have a chance. And also on LinkedIn. We have our own group on there where we talk about all kinds of DBA fundamentals and our presentations as well. Going to the next slide. Remember that our recordings will be available usually within 1 to 2 days on our previously mentioned YouTube channel. And with that, we go to William and Cheryl, where they'll discuss the Microsoft SQL Docs team and all the goodness that goes along with it. So with that, William and Cheryl, I turn the presentation over to you.
Thanks. We can go ahead and get our screen share going here. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us again. My colleague Cheryl and I are looking forward to this presentation. This is Becoming a Contributor to Microsoft Docs. We are members of the SQL Docs team at Microsoft, and today we're talking about external contributors to our open source Docs as code approach. We're on the SQL Docs team, but this is actually about every technology. We'll throw in some special SQL sauce there for you because I know this is a DBA crowd, but this is actually for everything. Anything in Azure, any Microsoft product operates their documentation in the same way. So here's today's agenda. I'm going to introduce DevRel. We're going to cover some tips and tricks in Microsoft Docs that you might not be aware of. And most importantly, we're going to contribute to Microsoft's open source Docs as code in GitHub. And what you need to know to contribute. And the first thing you need to know is that you'll need a github.com account if you don't have one already. And then throughout this presentation, feel free to add your questions to the chat at any time. My colleague and today's chat moderator, Cheryl, is going to bring them forward as time allows, and then we should have plenty of time for questions at the end. Well, let me go ahead and introduce myself then. Let's see, slides, there we go. So my name is William Assaf, and I'm on the SQL Docs team. Like I mentioned, my responsibilities are primarily big data clusters, Polybase, Azure Synapse, and SQL performance in Azure SQL database. And I actually just joined the Microsoft, and I joined the SQL Docs team in November of last year. And joining me today is my colleague Cheryl. Cheryl, you want to introduce yourself? Oh, Cheryl, you're on mute.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Adams. That happens at least once a day.
Yep.
I'm Cheryl Adams, also part of the SQL Docs team. I'm the lead for SQL migrations, but I also handle business continuity, including high availability, install, recovery, and backup.
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. So again, if you have any questions, Cheryl's going to be able to answer them in chat, or we can bring them forward and we'll discuss them live. And we should have plenty of time at the end. So internally, the SQL Docs team inside Microsoft is actually affectionately nicknamed Rogue One. And so when we're not violating multiple copyright laws with this image right here, we support tens of thousands of articles about SQL Server. And oftentimes we work a lot more with our product team partners and the engineering teams for the different products that we work with and not with each other. So it's actually really nice when we get to work with each other on a presentation like this, when Cheryl and I actually get to collaborate on something like this. That's actually kind of cool. So we get to work with the product groups and the program managers for everything SQL Server, including all its various flavors in Azure, as well as Azure Synapse Analytics and all the technologies under that umbrella. We also cover content for the data platforms tooling like Management Studio and Data Studio. But we're just one content team out of many. And today we're talking about all of Microsoft Docs, all technologies, everything in Azure, all the different products, because they all have their documentation run the same way through GitHub on docs.microsoft.com. So a bit about the mission statement for the hundreds of employees in the content and learning team at Microsoft. In short, we'll keep it short. We have two missions. I'm browsing the wrong thing here. We have two missions here. One, we want to enable job seekers, students, workers with online content. The breadth and depth of content to those audiences. Well, that second goal is why we're doing this presentation. We want to communicate specifically on how you can be a part of the quality Microsoft Docs experience. Microsoft Docs are not Wikipedia. It's not open to all edits. But we do have hundreds of thousands of articles, and we want to embrace the wisdom of you and the technical user community to help maintain that high level of quality. So opening the docs to external contributors, that's how we scale. So the SQL Docs team is just one of many Docs teams for different products in Microsoft's Cloud and AI DevRel team. So what is DevRel? Developer. Hey, if everybody could go ahead and mute.
He did not make sure he takes it.
Yeah, let's go ahead and mute. Thanks, everybody. If we could mute everybody else, that'd be great. All right. So what is DevRel? Developer relations. In a greater role, developer relations is the team that involves activities that connect developers and in-house manufacturers. That products establish a good continuous relationship with external developers through mutual communication. DevRel definitely involves docs, but it also involves like reference documentation for how to call an API or code samples. DevRel in other companies might look like community management, issue reporting and triage, release notes, focus groups, public interaction, things like that. Your favorite video game, for example, has DevRel folks to send and receive communication with the public about bug reports, troubleshooting, patch notes, discussion, mods, things like that. DevRel folks are technical, and we know the products well. In fact, some tech companies cycle developers in and out of DevRel positions so that DevRel folks have a keen awareness of technical detail, but also that developers see how end user consumes the products and the communication. At Microsoft, DevRel teams usually have a strong technical background from consulting or support positions. Many also have experience with project management, technical writing, blogging, and book writing. And finally, DevRel is a strategic advantage for product teams because this type of outreach enhances adoption and it provides authentic community engagement that goes beyond marketing or social media. Microsoft feels like its DevRel is a strategic advantage over its competitors. So in a way, DevRel is not marketing to CIOs and CEOs, it's marketing to developers, technical folks like you. There are products out there that we've all used, and we continue to use them because we had good documentation or support experiences, or because of easy adoption or smooth learning curves. So, in that spirit of authentic community involvement, let's dive in. So, some tips and tricks on docs that you might not be aware of. So just to give you a map around navigating specific docs and some features that we have here, I'm not going to explain every button or link, but first the bookmark button. It's on my next here. All right. The bookmark button allows you to save links to important reference documents. This may be useful for folks like students or where you have to work on a lot of different machines and you don't have access to a browser's bookmark bar. And then on each doc, you're going to see two search boxes. The first in the top right-hand corner searches the entire technology stack that you're in, for example, all of Azure. Then on the left, the table of contents covers many different articles, and it's here you can search titles within a table of contents. Then on the right, you'll see the navigation for the document itself. So those header links that you see are linkable directly. And if you want to send a colleague a link to a heading specifically, for example, within a large document, because you can hover over one of those headings and a little link icon appears. You can copy the URL with the page anchor appended, and you can see the URL has that page anchor appended. All the headings have those page anchors. So where it makes sense, the same doc might include different information for different versions of the product mentioned. We may use the same article with different versions of the content. For example, Windows versus Linux, or different releases of SQL Server, or different Azure implementations of SQL Server. This on the bottom left is a code snippet of the Markdown of a document showing how one article might display different content depending on the version requested. If a doc doesn't look quite right because of a version-specific detail, take a look at the version that you have requested in the top left-hand corner. That version drop-down also affects the table of contents, and so it can include or exclude certain articles depending on the version that you're browsing. Sometimes we'll handle versioning via tabs inside of a document, or we'll show that in the Applies To row at the top of the article, or we'll use colorful note boxes throughout the article to make sure that you know what SQL platform or version of SQL that the article covers or what that content covers. Also note that for content that is specific to older versions of SQL Server, before SQL Server 2016, for example, we do still have ways to access that content as it was, even if some of them are through offline docs only, and we'll talk about that in a sec. And while we support content for all supported versions of SQL Server, just a friendly reminder that SQL Server 2012 extended support ends next summer in July of 2022, so it's time to get that migration plan rolling in the next year. So speaking of Management Studio, not a lot of people are still aware of this, but when you have any text highlighted and you hit F1 in Management Studio, and this also applies to Azure, should bring you right to the corresponding article for that word or syntax that you highlighted. So if you have selected the help preference of open in browser, which is the default, this will bring you directly to the Microsoft Docs online article, in this case for the dynamic management view sys.dm exec sessions. If you hit F1 and the thing that you've highlighted does not bring you to the specific article that you expected, or it brings you to a different article than you'd expect, that actually might be a docs issue. So that's something you could file an issue for, and we'll talk about how to do that in this presentation. If your work environment is behind an air-gapped network, or if you work in high security environments like a nuclear power plant, you can download version-specific docs offline through SQL Server Management Studio. In fact, some older version-specific content, for example, the T-SQL reference content that is specific to SQL Server 2014, it's actually only available through this offline docs model. So, real quick poll. We don't have to do anything fancy in this. I don't even know if the polling is enabled in the chat. But real quick poll, how many of you actually work with offline documentation in SQL Server regularly because of the network environment that your work is in?
If you do, just raise your hand. There's a thing for their teams. That would probably be the easiest way to show that.
Oh, yeah, okay. People can't chat necessarily. I get you.
Some people find it easier just to raise their hand than actual chat.
Yeah. Well, cool. Yeah, so our documentation is actually a strategic advantage for competitors. Again, this is really important for very large organizations. Some in the public sector, like the Department of Defense, some in the private sector, like some companies at the top of the Fortune list. They want their development environments internal and secured away from the public internet. In the case of Microsoft documentation for SQL Server and Power BI and Azure and all sorts of other products, our documentation can be easily downloaded periodically and then rehosted internally in those environments so that they get the best of both worlds, a secure network for development and access to fresh product documentation. Some of our competitors want to deliver a bunch of scraped website images or like a million PDFs. I mean, come on, this is way better. And you can do all this through GitHub, as we're going to talk about, and that's how it's typically done. So are there any questions to this point?
None so far.
All right. So how do you provide feedback? There's three main ways to provide feedback. Feedback.azure.com for product ideas and bug reports. We're going to talk about that. And then there's two ways inside GitHub. First is GitHub issues, and the second is GitHub pull requests via a Git pull request, just like anything else. Just as if you were contributing to any other open source project on GitHub. So I don't know how many of you work in Git or have familiarity with terminology like fork, clone, push, pull, and commit. If you do, great. If you don't, no problem. Contributing can be done easily through the browser. You do not have to learn Git or Git bash, or you don't have to install anything. You don't have to know what a fork, a clone, a push, or a pull is. We'll have an explainer later on that process if you're interested in how that all works, and you can do it all through your own Git tools. So if you already work with Git or GitHub and you're familiar with pull requests and remote repositories, you can do all that. And later we'll talk about how that process works behind the scenes. But in the case of SQL Docs and all the docs on Microsoft documentation, but in the case of SQL Docs specifically, a lot of DBAs are not familiar with Git and GitHub, and so that's not a problem. Anyone can help, anyone can contribute to an article and get the ball rolling on getting a change with your name on it using the browser only. So even have a step-by-step tutorial at this URL here to guide you through the process of creating a pull request entirely through a browser with nothing to install. All you need is a github.com account. By contributing to Microsoft Docs for any product technology, you can be a part of the community and help edit docs that everyone uses. We'll talk about the contributor designation at the top of the article, where you can get your account at the top of each article that you help contribute to. And we average around 16 million page views a month in our articles. And you can do this entirely within the browser with nothing to install. I can't repeat that enough. So you're about to get an inside all the technologies integrate with the product teams. We join the support reviews and the team meetings, and we coordinate on release schedules. We work in GitHub. So let's walk through it. So what's a doc bug? To be clear, support issues don't belong in document feedback. And what we're about to talk about, the product feedback channel, feedback.azure.com, is also not for support issues. And the feedback options we're about to discuss, we have no SLA for response time or anything like that. This is not Microsoft support. If you're having a problem or an unexpected behavior or an outage, contact Microsoft support or your support partner. We triage incoming issues and pull requests from GitHub, and if it sounds like a support issue, your issue will likely be closed up with a polite message and maybe some links. Most doc issues that get attention address the docs. They request a fix for something missing or outdated or wrong, or a request that would have helped prevent an error or an outage, etc. So maybe after your support issue is resolved and there's something that the docs could include that would have helped you get out of that situation or not be in that situation, that's something that could go in a Git issue or a Git pull request. First option, that feedback.azure.com site. If you've got an idea to improve the product, this is where that would go. This is for product feedback and suggestions and maybe even reproducible bug reports. That doesn't actually belong in the docs system. That's for support, or you can use this feedback tool. If you've been around for a few years, you might remember the Connect system and the Connect items. A few years ago, those were all migrated to the feedback.azure.com portal. That's the place for comments and suggestions for the products now. And that's actually external to us on the Docs team, but that's where a lot of really great usability ideas and bug reports come from, and it's open to the public. To give your feedback on a product, you'll see this box at the bottom of most documentation pages. You can use the This Product button, and that will bring you directly to the feedback.azure.com site. This is the SQL Server page for feedback.azure.com, where you can see and submit comments and suggestions. You can vote on other people's ideas. You might see a lot of these links on social media for when someone has a really good suggestion and they want to get the product team's attention with a lot of votes in favor. And you can see here that dark theme for Management Studio is in there. I hope we get that one day. So let's say you've got a documentation issue then. Think of this. Think of a GitHub issue as a way of letting us know, hey, something's wrong, go fix it. We have goals to address these issues in a timely manner, but we'll be honest, issues are triaged and they might take days or weeks to get a satisfactory resolution. Not all issues will become a documentation change. So to create an issue, use that same little gray box that should be at the bottom of most articles. It's not at the bottom of all articles, but it should be at the bottom of most articles. And use the This Page button with a little GitHub icon in it. And that will bring you to the New Issue screen. Throw your comments in here, give it a title, hit Submit New Issue. You're done. We'll take it from here. And if you weren't aware, GitHub has dark mode. It's very easy. If you're like me, you like to work in dark mode apps and websites as much as possible. You can change this when you're logged into github.com. You can head to your profile page and then in settings. And I think there's also a way to do it in the appearance of your settings. Click the button and a little kitty cat appears. Also, if you're an enthusiast for dark mode websites, docs.microsoft.com has a dark theme too. Check out the footer of any doc in the website and you can change your you can change your theme to dark mode. And I also hear that dark mode is coming soon to Microsoft Word and LinkedIn, and I'm very excited about that as well. All right, enough about dark mode, apps and websites. Okay, back to contributing. Third option, you've got a documentation issue and you want to suggest the edits yourself. You can actually click in the top right-hand corner, and this should be enabled for all articles. Click in the top right-hand corner on the Edit button. Most articles, not all articles. There are some exceptions. Some of the articles are API driven, and they're not hand edited. Okay, so clicking on the Edit button in a doc then brings you to the GitHub preview page in github.com. You're outside of docs.microsoft.com now. From here, click the pencil button in the top right-hand corner, and this is going to be boxed in red. And after you click the pencil button, now you're looking at the actual Markdown code in a text edit box of the article. It might but rather in code in Markdown or in YAML. Markdown is a lightweight text markup language created for formatting rich text with a plain text editor. GitHub has their own formal implementation of Markdown called GitHub Flavored Markdown. Many different online sites use Markdown already, including GitHub, but also GitLab, Reddit, Stack Exchange, Bitbucket, Drupal, and a lot more. So you might already be more familiar with Markdown than you think. So make your changes here in the document. If you're not familiar with Markdown, it's pretty easy to understand once you get rolling. And don't worry about the formatting being perfect. The content team will always review your content submission and potentially tweak it to Microsoft standards before it is merged live. There are plenty of resources online for basic Markdown syntax, but if you don't get something quite right, whether it's bold or italicized or something like that, don't sweat that. Then you can preview your changes in that button that I have boxed in red there. You preview the Markdown formatting. And then at the bottom, once you've made your changes, here's your chance to commit your changes. So enter your pull request title and the comments. Give it a description. You can throw in the hashtag ping MSFT docs or ping Microsoft Docs. That's just a way to wave hi to us, let you know you heard about us. We'll talk more about that later. You can also use that same hashtag on Twitter to say hi, maybe to draw attention to the pull request that you just created so that we can recognize you as a contributor there as well. So then choose the create a new branch for this commit and start a pull request radio button. The other one is actually going to be disabled. Unlike some open source projects, we don't allow you to commit code directly to the live repository. So this is the option you're going to do. You'll notice it creates a new branch for you with a simple name. That's fine. You don't have to worry about changing that. If you're not familiar with GitHub terminology like branches or pull requests, don't worry. You don't have to be. Once you submit your pull request by clicking the green commit changes button right there, we got it from here. We'll keep you updated as your pull request moves through the process. Your changes to the Markdown file will then be proposed for merge, triaged, and reviewed by the article's author and its reviewers. The content team for the article takes it from there. We'll reply to the pull request in the comments, we'll make edits if necessary, and eventually we may merge the code into the live docs repository. And you'll be notified along the way with feedback directly from one of us on the content team. Again, you can do all this if you want through your own tooling to create your own fork, your own branch, push commits, get a pull request going. That's what we and the content teams do every day. If you just want to use github.com, use the website to handle the entire process for you. It's as easy as you've just seen. It's actually much easier, and sometimes we even use this for real simple changes. And in fact, we've talked about issues versus pull requests. You may find that a pull request is easier. For example, if you were to write an issue to say, hey, this third bullet under this paragraph, the bold icon should be here before this part of the sentence, it's probably really easy to go in and just make the change yourself and propose that. That's why pull requests are sometimes much easier to do. And you get contribution credit. We'll talk about that in a second. So here's what it looks like after you've submitted your pull request. Your pull request will start in an open status, but you can see here that this one is already merged, which means it's been accepted and it's been pushed into the preview repository. Well, soon it'll be merged into the live repository. Don't worry about that. We'll talk about that in a second. So you can see what GitHub did here for you was to automatically, in the background, create a fork of the repository, a fork of the project, create a branch here in Hiroshi's name, and then the pull request itself includes a log of all the activity, including the commit right there that I have with the red arrow. Pull requests can include many different commits for many different files. Then the pull request log contains all the automated and manually created messages as well. Automation for the merge engines, all the commits, any conversation and notes from anyone assigned, internal or external to Microsoft. You'll receive an email anytime anyone uses your username with the @ symbol, and you can respond in conversation at the bottom here with the comment button. But once your pull request is created, again, we take it from there. Both you and Microsoft differential. Red is the old code, green is the new, the changed characters are highlighted, and here we can see that Hiroshi has suggested a real simple typo fix. The 2 asterisks are for bold and they were in the wrong place. Again, this is probably just easier to move those 2 characters around in a pull request than trying to describe what's going on in an issue. This is also really easy to approve. If you still want to make more changes to the file, like say you spot something else, you can issue another commit to the same pull request. Simply click on the 3 dots icon on the right here, boxed in red, and then hit Edit File. Then you can edit the file again, submit another change to your same open pull request. After you've submitted your pull request, though, you can sit back. We got it from here, and we'll let you know if we have any questions or a status update. So those are your 3 options. Now, which of these is most helpful to Microsoft for Docs, and what gives you contribution credit? The third option, pull requests. That's what we actually want to see. After your pull request is in, you can say hi to us on Twitter so we can recognize you as a contributor there as well, again with the hashtag ping MSFTDocs. If you've contributed via a pull request, and we eventually merge your commit into the document, you'll get your GitHub profile picture and a link to your GitHub account at the top of the document. The folks listed here are those both inside and external to Microsoft that submitted commits to this article. You only get your name and a logo on an article for a pull request. You do not get this recognition for just an issue. And these contributions can be a part of your MVP activity for your Microsoft MVP application, or your renewal activity, of course, too. So if you're not sure what should change, just give it a shot. Don't be afraid to submit a pull request. If it's not quite right, if it's not formatted perfectly, don't worry. We'll adjust that, but at least you've drawn attention to it. At least the problem will get fixed. For images, graphics, charts, etc., we actually have designers to get images updated in a standardized way, so there's no need to edit images yourself. Finally, capitalization. The capitalization of various features and products inside Microsoft. This is actually one of the most nuanced bits there is about publishing. Marketing usually wins these. Marketing always wins these arguments, regardless of how product documentation evolved through the development process. So, for example, we just had a big series of pull requests come through to make a lot of capitalization changes that were mostly misguided. So again, the task is tricky enough when you have inside information directly from inside sources. We'll handle that part. Yes, if you spot inconsistencies between marketing content and documentation content or learn or training content, you should know that we're regularly discussing and working that stuff out internally, but don't be afraid to point something out. For example, the product names and the feature names and phrasing are difficult to get just right, and it's trickiest when a generic word is in the product name. So just because we have a product called Azure Database or Azure Firewall doesn't mean that every word database or firewall is now capitalized. This is even more difficult for our international partners and customers because capitalization often means a product or a service name shouldn't be translated, or it should be translated in a specific way. But a lowercase common noun of the same term should be translated. That inconsistency in capitalization confuses translators and confuses customers. So that consistency is important, and it is core to the goal of our brand voice, which is above all to be simple and to be human. And if we can do better to meet that goal, please let us know. So, one last bit about contributions for localization issues, such as a translation issue. If you've got a translation issue to raise, those are actually submitted by email now, and this process has changed recently. You can download an email template from this link right here, aka MS DocSite lock feedback or localization feedback. Submit your feedback in any language. It will be translated and routed to the correct localization team. If you've got a technical issue with an article and you're most comfortable submitting your issue in another language than English, no problem. Instead of creating an issue or a pull request in English or in the localized version of the document, you can use this email template as well. It will be translated and then passed along to the proper content team, like our team, the SQL Docs team. Either way, thanks for contributing to making Microsoft Docs better for everyone, everywhere. About how we use GitHub to host Microsoft documentation. It might surprise you to learn that Microsoft Docs are not edited in Word, again, but rather in code in Markdown or YAML. We've already talked about Markdown. So YAML is used for tables of contents and frequently asked questions articles. Articles where that format is just better for search engine optimization. YAML is another plain text markup language that's often used for structuring or serializing data. We spend most of our time in Visual Studio Code or Azure Data Studio, which is kind of the same thing as Visual Studio Code. And we have other tools to help with automated link checking, syntax formatting, for bulk updates, and a series of include files to tokenize things like product names. We have a rich set of metadata for each article. And we do pay attention to how articles perform in terms of search engine optimization and traffic patterns and trends, all driven through Azure Analytics and Custo queries. We try to improve poorly performing articles, And we track that. We use many different metrics to track the performance of an article, including, for example, if you copy texts from an article, that's good. Or if you scroll, click through, dwell, the same kind of metrics that any website uses these days to measure how effective a website is without capturing any personal tracking information or wider tracking information. For big article updates, we have systems to handle release branches for when we want to work on documentation for months and then release all of it at once during an Ignite keynote, for example. So here's some behind the scenes of how Microsoft Docs and Git work, specifically in GitHub, where all the Microsoft documentation is managed. If you're new to Git and you don't understand any of this, don't worry. As we've explained, all this is actually managed for you. But here's the basic Git workflow. For those of you who work in GitHub, this might be interesting as well, how we use it, how we use the repositories. So a repository like SQL Docs in the Microsoft Docs account is where the source is housed and where the website engine pulls Markdown to present the live pictures to you in the website. A fork is a copy of the repository associated to your account in GitHub. We have all created forks of each repo that we work with in our GitHub accounts. A clone is a copy of a fork that's brought down locally to your workstation. The files are literally copied onto your workstation so that you can make edits. To tell the two apart, a common convention is to reference your remote fork as origin and the code base that you will eventually push to as upstream. These are called remote names or just remotes. And these are the common naming conventions. You can actually choose any name. You'll have an origin and an upstream for each repo that you work in. So when you go to actually make changes to a file or to add or remove files, you'll create a working branch that is relevant just to the chunk of changes you'll be making. And you want a branch to contain only the changes for a specific feature or issue that you're addressing so that it can be treated as a block of changes to go back upstream. So your work goes into the branch, and here are the branches to fix an issue with the ISO data appended to the front. And when you're done, first, the branch is committed locally to your clone. It's still on your machine here. Nothing has actually been transmitted to the cloud. Then you issue a push to your origin on github.com, the fork of the code in your GitHub account. Now it's actually in the cloud. Then you issue a pull request asking Microsoft Docs to accept changes from your repository so that your changes can be merged in from your fork to the main repository. Now, to explain it a little closer to the reality of how things work internally, a little more complicated, we actually have two repositories in the Microsoft Docs account, and you don't have to worry about this. If you're submitting pull requests outside the browser, all you see is SQL Docs. But internally, we have SQL Docs PR, the preview repository. The SQL Docs repository drives the website, but like true professionals, we don't develop against production. We only develop in a preview repository, which is not visible to the public, and allows us to work in and preview the merged state of our changes in the actual live repository. This build process to the live website then occurs usually twice a day and is gated by a team of build reviewers. But when you use github.com to submit changes in the browser with or when you use your tools, necessary occurs inside the SQL Docs repo. And again, this same docs as code pattern applies to any Microsoft technology inside Microsoft Docs. So we are almost there. Let me talk you through, well, there's some resources here if you're interested in learning more about Git or GitHub. Microsoft Learn has some really good training materials here for you. Real quick, some of the new things in Microsoft Docs, and then we'll go to any Q&A for the rest of the time that we have. So in February, we introduced dynamic recommended content in the footer of many Microsoft Docs articles. These links are actually generated by a machine learning solution based on a model that describes customer behaviors within our documentation set. we've really seen good metrics on tracking traffic to these recommended links. So we think this is helpful in helping people find what they need. And then one other thing that's new to Docs in the last month or so, you can add your certifications to your login to docs.microsoft.com by permanently, and note this is a permanent thing, connecting your certification profile from Microsoft Learn to Microsoft Docs. You can go to your profile in Learn or Docs to get here, and then you go to Certifications, and then you can click Connect, and you can connect your certification profile. So from there, you can get notifications about your certifications renewals and a lot more, including a link directly to Pearson VUE to schedule the exams that you're pursuing. Okay, and then a couple upcoming events. Microsoft Build is May 25th to 27th. You can register that. That Microsoft Build is where developers, architects, startups, and students learn, connect, and code together, sharing knowledge and expanding their skill set while exploring new ways of innovating for tomorrow. That's coming up later this month, in about 2 weeks. And then Microsoft Inspire is July 14th and 15th, and registration for that will actually open up after Build later this month. And that does it for today. Do we have any questions, or is there anything you'd like to ask?
Well, if no one else does, I know I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
For the Microsoft certifications, that part where you were talking about, you can link it to your, yes, that one.
Uh-huh.
Is it just Microsoft certifications, or is it open to anything else?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is. I don't know if it's everything Pearson VUE offers, but no, I'm pretty sure it's just Microsoft and Learn. So specifically the Learn certifications, you know, you completing the Learn modules and things like that. You can connect that to Docs, and that way you can get announcements and notifications and renewals and things like that anytime you browse docs.microsoft.com, which I don't know about you, but is all the time, daily.
If it's not, it should be.
Daniel asks, is there a way to do documentation ourselves? Is there a way for us to do our own documentation? Daniel, could you maybe rephrase? I'm not sure I understand your question. Do your documentation like for your own products in GitHub.com? I think what Daniel might be asking is the scenario for when docs are rehosted internally. Oh, internally our own documentation is dreadful. I understand. Yeah, so the Docs engine, the thing that actually turns the Markdown into the docs.microsoft.com website is a custom engine. I don't know if that is released publicly as a product or anything like that. It's pretty sophisticated. Our content and learning department has multiple developers just working on the Docs website all the time on various features. And I know that is something, though, that they are considering or they're working on. The Department of Defense, for example, has a very large private cloud. They're going to have documentation rehosted internally. And I believe they're working on some kind of lightweight way to rehost a website internally using the GitHub repository that's going to be downloaded periodically. Is there a style guide to follow when making suggestions? That's a great question. There is a style guide that's made public. And I'm going to give you the external link here.
Oh, I was going to post it, but if you've got it, that's
thank you. No, thank you. Go ahead, Cheryl. You're probably going to beat me to it.
No, you might beat me.
Grace, then.
Let's see. What do I?
Yeah, I think I got it right here. Good question, Michael. That should be public, or no? Maybe that's internal as well. Dang it.
What about this link? The link I just posted, is that not?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. Cheryl's right, as usual.
Oh.
Docs.microsoft.com/contribute.
I did want to jump back to the question from Daniel. So one of the things that I have found is that there are quite a few document-based repos that are out there that have their own code that allows you to refine your documentation. So even if you just search through GitHub, you may find an open source. It won't look like this, but if you're looking for some improvement or just looking at how other individuals are doing documentation, I know I helped a couple of nonprofits do their documentation, and we found a repo that had some templates that they were able to model and get this and get something a lot better than what they had before. So you don't necessarily have to wing it per se. There's so many repos out there that have really good documentation as far as their layout. So I would encourage you to kind of explore through GitHub and take a look at some of those repos.
Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks for throwing that in. Thanks for contributing to that as usual. Nice, Daniel. Yeah. So if you don't have access to the chat, I understand that sometimes Teams doesn't let people have access to the chat. The link we're going to send you to for the style guide is docs.microsoft.com/contribute. It's the same link you'd go to get a walkthrough of how to do a pull request or really any other way that you want to contribute. But there's also a link in there to a style guide if you want to see the styles and the naming conventions and capitalization and things like that Microsoft wants us to follow in documentation.
And I'll also put this link out on the website when we get the recording up for.
Yeah, great. Great, thanks. And actually, you know what we should mention, Cheryl, is that AKA MS Edit SQL Docs is a version, because this is a SQL user group, and we've presented to all sorts of different user groups, but because it's a SQL user group, aka.ms/edit SQL Docs is a specific guide of how to contribute to the SQL repository. It's kind of redundant with the main contributor document, but it has some more specific and detailed instructions right there that might be helpful to you as well.
Yeah, one of the things that I appreciate about that particular guide is just even displaying code snippets, which I always found kind of challenging on other platforms, that it just looked like regular text. So I do like the information that's in the contributor guide and the style guide for how to define blocks of code if you're using that in your documentation. I think that really makes it stand out.
Great point, Cheryl. Shane asks, is there a minimum amount of changes that need to be made to a doc? No. As you can see, the example that we used before, where we tried to just be super duper simple, Hiroshi put in, where was it? Hiroshi put in literally moving 2 characters around. It's a perfectly valid pull request, perfectly valid typo that you're fixing there. If you see something that's misspelled or spacing or formatting or something like that, perfectly fine to put in a pull request just for that, and you will get contribution credit to that article just for that. Todd asks, how much do you need before royalties kick in? A lot more than we do, because there's no royalties for docs. So it's good. That's good. All right. Any other questions? Look, thank you very much for joining us. This has been great. Good questions so far. Yeah, we've been doing this for a long time, and whenever somebody comes up with a brand new question, it kind of sticks out. It's good. And we're getting some good ones today.
One thing I wanted to mention, and this is totally off track, but I think it's important. If you're thinking, what I like about the contributor guide is it has a whole section for getting started. So if you've never done this before, there's a walkthrough for setting up and how to do it. So if you don't have access to the video, or if you didn't have an opportunity to look at the video because you're doing other things, that contributor guide actually walks you through the complete setup of how to create a PR and how to pull it. The other advantage of practicing and doing some of the minor ones is that maybe you might have an opportunity to participate in Hacktoberfest, which is a really big community-driven event where you create pull requests, and if you interesting thing I just want to say is that they're being a little bit more harder on pull requests that aren't legitimate. So I think that our repo is an excellent opportunity for you to learn how to do those pull requests, but then also participate in that community effort that starts in October if you're interested.
Yeah, that's a GitHub event, a GitHub.com event, and so you can actually earn credits towards contributing to any open source project on GitHub. And if you do that in October, you get a T-shirt or whatever it is that they're going to give away this year.
So practice on our stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely. And if you have an MVP application or renewal in progress, this is definitely one of those things that you could put down in your activity. As always with MVP stuff, it's qualitative over quantitative. And we don't really work on that side of it, so I can't really answer any more questions specific to the MVP side, but this is definitely something that could contribute to your application. All right, well, good stuff. Kevin, if there's anything else that we need to do for your group or any other questions, I think we're good.
Nope, I am quite pleased. I know I have learned a lot about the new way to contribute. I think this is great, and hopefully soon I'll have a chance to go through and actually make updates to all kinds of SQL documentation.
Awesome. And when you do, let us know that you heard about us through this presentation by using that hashtag #PingMSFTDocs, and that's a way for us to kind of communicate back to you as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, both William and Cheryl. We thoroughly enjoyed having you. I know I've learned a lot. I'm sure our team has as well. So with that, we do thank you all so much. Have a great day and a great week.
Thanks,
everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye.